Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Arts, Parks, and Neighborhoods Committee. I'm Paul Krikorian, Chair of the committee. Today is January 25th, 2012, and it is 3:10 p.m. We're ready to get started. And we'll be taking general public comment at the conclusion of today's agenda items. So if you would like to offer general comment on an item not on today's agenda, please fill out a white comment card and bring it forward. And we will be taking comment on each of the individual agenda items as we call them up. So likewise, fill out a card, please indicate the agenda item that you'd like to comment upon and bring those up front to the clerk. And we're ready to start with item. What I'd like to do is proceed with items 1 through 3 together, if we could. So why don't we go ahead and introduce those items and our report.
Item number 1, LA Department of Aging report relative to the release of the evidence-based program request for proposal for the selection of contractors to provide EBP services. Item 2 is LADOA report relative to the authority to amend senior service contracts with CNSRQACA/International Institute of Los Angeles and BETZEC, respectively, to close out fiscal year 2010-2011. Item number 3 is an LADOA report relative to requesting carryover authority and appropriations transfer authority for the Title V Older Americans Act program and approval of contract amendment number 1 2M1011-25 for the Medicare Improvements for Patients and Providers program.
All right, thank you. We have representatives of the Department of Aging here. If you could please introduce yourself and provide your report on these matters, please.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is James Dunn, Assistant General Manager, Department of Aging. With me are
Dale Osborne from the Department of Aging.
Charles Shivers. We have 3 items before your committee today. The first one being request for authorization to release our RFP for evidence-based programs. We ask that we be allowed to release it just due to the timing of the program and the fact that our current contracts end March 31st. We ask that this move forward as quickly as possible to council. Our second item is a routine item where the majority of our services are contracted out with community-based agencies with Older American Act funds, Prop A transportation funds, and general city purposes funds for meals. This is basically our annual routine request to close out those contracts and amend contracts for 3 of our providers that overserved and overspent for the year. It also includes a number of technical adjustments containing control instructions with some of our existing contracts, as well as a request for payment to our contractors for Thanksgiving Day meals. And our last item, perhaps Charles can speak on that one.
Excuse me, the last item involves 2 different grants. The first one is the Title V program, which is the Senior Community Service Employment Program. It assists older adults return to the workforce, transition from subsidized to unsubsidized jobs. The council mayor previously approved the acceptance of $924,000 grant funds for the extension grants. The issue is the department is requesting an administrative remedy to create the accounts for within this fiscal year to close out the books as of January 30th, 2012. In doing so, the controller's instructions were previously approved to create the accounts last fiscal year. We need to create them this fiscal year to complete the close.
Why is that? Why were those accounts?
On August 24th, which was after the close of the fiscal year.
Okay.
Secondly, with the Title V budget, we have the current budget, and we're requesting reappropriation authority within the budget to provide equipment for our monitors out in the field and the work source centers, along with approximately $35,000 for training related to enhancing the computer skills of 187 participants within the program. The second item is for that's the Medicare Improvements for Patient and Providers Act. These are non-competitive grant funds administered through approving contract amendment number 1, we'll be receiving, to be able to reappropriate and carry over $77,000 from last fiscal year into this fiscal year, and be able to reappropriate some of the funds within there so as to maximize the use of the funds this fiscal year.
Okay, great. That's a non-competitive grant. It's a formulaic thing that's determined based on number of seniors that we have below poverty level or some formula like that.
That's
okay.
correct.
Okay. We don't have any public comments on these matters? Okay, it'll be the recommendation of the chair then to approve the recommendations and advance to council.
Thank you very much.
All right, that brings us to item 4.
Item number 4, motion, Krikorian Parks, Garcetti, relative to the Department of Recreation and Parks, reporting on options and costs of applying the principles of the low-impact development ordinance to City Hall park restorations and making said park a model for sustainable urban landscaping. Additionally, subsequent to the release of the agenda, the Department of Rec and Parks also submitted a report, which is been distributed.
I'm sorry, it has been distributed?
Got a copy.
Okay, are there public copies available as well?
One up there and online.
Okay, very good. All right, and we have representatives of Recreation and Parks here who have come armed with slides.
Good morning. Mike Shaw with the Department of Recreation and Parks. I'm joined by Tom Gibson and Robert Oyakawa of my design staff for the department. Before we begin on the presentation of the slides, and we'll be rolling through them shortly, but I just wanted to go through, obviously we're here to report on the Council File 11-2002. We're going to walk through each of the items regarding the extent of the damage, options to restore, and the application of the LID, Low Impact Development Ordinance, as it might pertain to the landscaping around City Hall. Let me begin with the extent of the damage that was caused by Occupy LA. The main part of the damage was done to the turf, which is quite obvious to most by looking at it, obviously due to the tents and things that covered the grass for an extended period of time, not allowing any irrigation or sunlight to get to the grass. We had damage to some limb damage to some trees. We had electrical and irrigation infrastructure damage. I would call that minor, much less than what we had anticipated. And we had a good deal of graffiti, particularly around the Flint Fountain and some of the memorial benches in and around the South Lawn area. We've estimated the cost to put, and then this excludes the graffiti because we're working with cultural affairs on that, but the estimated cost to put it back just exactly the way it was prior to the Occupy event is $76,000. And that simply includes reestablishing the turf. It's important that I note that that's considerably less than what we had earlier reports were during the Occupy LA event, and that's simply because we assumed the worst. We had no idea how or what the condition of the irrigation infrastructure was, so we essentially based our initial numbers on replacing everything. Luckily, that was not the case. We did have some minor irrigation leaks, but mostly the irrigation infrastructure is intact.
Also, during the occupation, there was concern expressed about the health of the trees.
Correct.
You mentioned limb damage. There was originally concern that there might be more significant damage to trees. I gather that turned out not to be as big a concern as you initially thought.
Had the occupation continued, we probably would have had a lot more damage to the trees, but shortly after we started doing that analysis and looking at the trees, the event kind of ended. So we were able to, get the trees back to, to allowing watering and things like that. So it could have been much, much worse.
Now, before you speak to options going forward, to get to the status quo of today, there's already been a substantial amount of cleanup of the area, of decontamination of the area, and so on. Can you speak a little bit to that? What had to be done, and what have been the costs that have been entailed already?
Certainly, there was many city departments involved, so it'll be difficult for me to report on their cost.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is, yes, the $76,000 is really basically from what you see today to put the grass back. there was an enormous amount of cost put in, mainly between Recreation and Parks, the Bureau of Street Services, the Department of General Services, and well, those are probably the three. And actually, and then Bureau of Sanitation as well. So most of those costs involved the leading up to the night of the event. It was moving K-rail in with street services, the fencing, costs associated with that. Just the rental of the fence is $10,000. We spent an enormous amount of overtime resources that evening to put up the K-rail and things like that. The trash removal was all done within basically 24 hours of the exit of the occupation. So, but the costs associated with that were really mostly borne by the Department of General Services and Bureau of Street and Bureau of Sanitation. I believe our cost prior to this is somewhere in the range of $50,000 to $75,000 of what we spent. I'm not sure exactly. I mean, I know the LAPD had an enormous expense in there as well, of course. But
Okay.
so continuing on, as we begin to discuss the possibilities, a key common theme that you're going to hear is water conservation. So I'd like to discuss for a moment what we believe is an incredibly unknown story about water conservation in this city. First, City Hall was retrofitted more than 3 years ago with a ET-based system, which is also commonly referred to as a smart irrigation system. Essentially, that type of system amounts to calculating the amount of water that's necessary to put back based on evapotranspiration. So it takes into account things like the existing weather, the types of plants, the soil gradients, and so on and so forth. So it takes into, that's what makes the controller smart. So in other words, most controllers in the old days were basically timed clock systems. So regardless of the weather, they turned on and turned off for a certain amount of time and used a certain amount of water, not related to anything other than what it was told to do on the clock. So it's important to note that City Hall was already 3 years ago was retrofitted by our department to have that system, which leads me into talking about that type of system with the conservation measures that are also described in the city's LID ordinance, as well as the state's model landscape ordinance. All of those are very consistent. That types of systems are very consistent with that. However, prior to the city adopting either of those measures, Rec and Parks initiated a strategic water conservation plan in 2007. Some of the things that you see on the slides in front of you is that the plan that we set out clear implementable goals to reduce water use using more recycled water, turf reduction, and renovating outdated irrigation infrastructure. The cumulative effect has resulted in more than a 30% decrease in our water usage since 2007. And that amounts to 1 billion gallons of water that we reduced since the year 2007, representing an annual savings to our department of $2 million. So if you look at the graph that's up before you, you'll see from 2007, and I want to point out 2007 was a drought year, based on when they started recording how much precipitation rate we got in this city. That was the lowest recorded amount since the late 1800s. And that was the year that really drove a lot of, it was the mayor came out with the initiative to decrease our water use, which spurred us to come up with our own, because we're obviously a large water user in the city, probably the largest or next to the largest. And you can see since 2007, the drastic reduction in water use by our department. And the blue line represents the amount of park acreage that's been added since. So certainly I'm not suggesting that the 600 acres that we added are all 100% irrigated, but nonetheless, we've added a significant amount of park acreage while still continuing to decrease our water use. So this in itself, although we've demonstrated this in many parks throughout the city, probably what we haven't done best is demonstrated in the most iconic park as it relates to the Civic Center. And I think we're looking at this now as an opportunity to do that. So you'll hear about those in the upcoming options. So following the exit of Occupy LA, a rather large discussion began on what the landscape should look like and what City Hall should be representing as it pertains to landscaping. So there was many organizations, city residents, private landscape designers who began to emerge with their own ideas redoing the landscape. Go to the next slide, Robert. So with such a high interest, Rec Park's beginning a process for vetting options. So this is basically the outreach that's been done or that's coming up that we're planning to do through, we still have to go through Rec and Parks Board of Commissioners, obviously City Council and Cultural Heritage Commission. But we've met, with the Downtown Neighborhood Council and got some feedback from them, and as well as put the options that we have been discussing up on our website to give a broader audience to the general city. And we got some good press from that in the LA Times over a couple different articles, and we've received, I believe, more than 200 emails
Over about 200 and almost 40 or so.
regarding the comments and feedback based on those options. So we have tried to branch out. So we took advantage of the interest by inviting many of these organizations to participate in a roundtable discussion to explore these options. So what you're seeing there are the professionals that agreed to come in and wanted to share that with you. There's a lot of nonprofit groups there. There's a lot of private architects that are widely known throughout the city that basically came in, and we began to discuss what the potential options were for renovating the landscape. So it wasn't just us looking at it. We brought in a pretty large professional audience as well.
And before we move on, just for clarity of thought, we're talking primarily about City Hall with the South Lawn, right? Because I know the North Lawn was there were already discussions underway about what to do with the North Lawn even prior to this. So how are you distinguishing this process from the North Lawn process?
Well, we've kind of combined them because the North Lawn, although prior to, more than a year ago, there's been a design ongoing with, what it could be out there with drought-tolerant landscaping and basically removing all the turf. But as a result of the South Lawn coming into the equation, essentially now we're looking at design continuity for what you're doing in the North Lawn with it. So it's going to change slightly, only to match, but it's still going to be 100% turf reduction in the North Lawn. We haven't changed it. Just maybe the plant selection might change a little bit, just to mirror what might happen in the South Lawn. So the designers are looking at that. So we've been able to meet with this professional group twice prior to this meeting, and and with the meetings that we had with the Downtown Neighborhood Council, we took a straw poll with them, and the majority of their members supported a specific option, which we're going to show you. And generally, it kind of migrated towards a consistent option, which we believe is what we're calling the preferred option that Tom and Robert are going to go through. One other important part of this, if you go to the next slide, Robert, is to look at really the design criteria around City Hall. It's not, people like to say it's a blank slate, and to a degree it is, but there's certain factors that we wanted to make sure that we educated people on that happens with City Hall, and there's a large different types of functions that happen out there. There's more than 150 events out there, and particularly in the South Lawn every year. So we had to look at the historical uses, but of what the lawn was used for, and be sensitive to the fact that City Hall has a historical designation. So it's not that we can go in there and start removing walkways and the fountain. Those are really off the table. Those are character-defining features to the historical nomination of this building. But we do recognize that we have a chance to represent our high commitment to sustainable design through the use of more drought-tolerant planting. So. With all of those factors introduced, it kind of leads you into, one of our options was basically to do nothing but drought-tolerant planting, but in reality, that gets in the way of the functional use of the area, and so when you take all those factors into play, you start getting into what seems to be a balanced approach for achieving what you want to achieve with sustainable design, as well as the historical use of the lawn. So. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom to run you quickly through the different options.
Okay. As Mike was saying earlier, just to take it right back to all turf, north and south, this is just showing that, and that the cost is $76,000, and that would be zero reduction in turf. Then we proceeded to go with our three kind of distinctive and different options, their first three options, which showed on all of these options, the North Lawn is shown as having a design as part of the program. So all the changes are really, the differences are on the lower section, the south lawn area. So on the first option 1, the north lawn is there, but the south lawn is returned all to turf, and the planting areas all stay exactly the same. So that's kind of the base. Option 2, and that's a 25% turf reduction on that, basically the north lawn, and the cost was $215,000. Okay. Option 2. We added a lot of planting areas on the south sloped areas coming away from the building and along the foundation of the building, the foundation planting. Also along Spring Street, we added quite a lot of planting area and a decomposed granite path, which comes from the bus stop area right next to the Spring Street steps and comes and wraps around to the front landing at the south area. Then we added planting areas which would flank the staircases. And then we bumped out the corner planting areas to include the buttressed ficus tree roots. So those would just kind of expand and incorporate those into the planting areas. And then the rest of that area the lower lawn flat area would remain turf. And we have some turf panels on the slope as well. There's a lot of people who like to spend time on the turf area in that. You can see people all the time out there enjoying the afternoon and having their lunch. Okay, let's go to the next one. Oh, okay. The capital cost on that was $390,000, 58% turf reduction on that one. Then option 3 was the more drastic of the 3 options, which would turn the entire sloped areas at the base of City Hall all into planting areas and still have a DG pathway from the bus stop to the landing at the stairs. And then it would take the 3 lower areas under the ficus trees and each of those triangular areas and put decomposed granite into the center of each of those areas. It would leave a band of turf around each of the decomposed granite areas and add permeable pavement pathways reaching into the decomposed granite areas. Okay. And then the cost on that one was $540,000 and a turf reduction of 80%. And so after all of our community input that we received, we ended up coming back to this option, which is we call our preferred option, which allows for the most usable gathering space for all the various events that we have throughout the year here. It actually gives us the most versatile space possible. But what we did was we wanted to retain at least 50% turf reduction for the site. So we moved the planting areas around. We added more planting to the Spring Street side, and we added a little bit more planting into the triangular areas, and which also at the Central Plaza area, which that's also kind of harkens back to some of the earliest designs of City Hall. So there's also a historical precedent for this. And then with the foundation planting along the building to round it out. One of the things we really want to do, and we're pretty excited about, is to bring the use of native plants back into the city, and it's particularly back into City Hall as an example of how we can further sustainable landscaping. And so our goal is to do a 50% use of native plantings along with other low water appropriate Mediterranean plants. So it's decorative, and the citizens of Los Angeles can see the different ways you can use all these low water plants to improve their own landscaping and still be beautiful. Okay. Okay. Oh yeah. Also in this plan, in the lower left-hand corner, there's where the Fireman's Memorial is. We were going to add a decomposed granite path that leads over to it. So, and Councilman Labange requested that happen. So, okay. The cost on this one is $390,000. annual maintenance cost is $135,000, and we end up with a 51% turf reduction on this.
On the maintenance cost, the more turf reduction that we have, the higher the maintenance cost. I assume that's primarily because it's more time consuming to maintain a planted bed than it is mow and blow turf. But is this maintenance cost net of the cost of water? So in other words, do these maintenance costs already assume the savings that will be realized by the reduced amount of water that will have to be utilized for maintenance?
Oh, yeah, I'll answer that. The answer, yes, it is of our opinion that the increased maintenance is mainly due to exactly what you said around the planters. But the offset in water savings, our calculation that we performed with water and power, based on the amount of water that we would save, amounted to, if you put a dollar amount to the amount of water we would save for each option, option 1 was $1,000 annually, option 2 was $2,000 annually, and option 3 was $3,000 annually. So there's not, when it comes to the actual capital value of that, it's pretty low. We're looking at this, mainly because we had already done a lot to reduce our water use at City Hall. This will definitely help, and will definitely reduce it. But it truly is a demonstration for all residents of stuff that and the types of plants that we want to put in here are plants that anybody could put in at their home. So we're kind of looking at it like that as most of the positives.
So looking backwards, I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't have this at your fingertips, but when you installed the smart irrigation technology and you have the 3-year track record now of
Right.
seeing the results of that, can you quantify the degree of savings that you've realized from that investment in reduced water use?
Probably not right at my fingertips. No, I didn't actually think to have them run those numbers. I mean, we certainly could.
It would be interesting to know.
Yeah. I mean, I can say this. Generally, smart irrigation systems, once you renovate them, you generally see percentage-wise about a 20% reduction in your water use. That's some are more, some are less. It just depends on what your previous water levels were, because in some cases you could be overwatering, so it's hard to really gauge. But on an average, we use 20% as a savings.
So with a system like that already installed, there's not a lot of low-hanging fruit for conservation, for water conservation, absent actual reduction of the turf size, which is going to drive up your maintenance costs.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
There was a lot of our comments that we see from our website were from people who wanted us to use a native grass instead of turf, or some other alternative. But as a department, we know that the commercial turf that we use, and we know we can maintain it, and so that's a sustainable item in itself. But also that, but a lot of the main proponents for native plantings, the main organizations, people were referring us to them for their advice, which we went to them for their advice, but they were not either able to find any kind of a native grass that would work under the criteria that we have to plant under here. So these are some renderings we made of what the City Hall Plaza and Park could look like. This is a view of from the Central Plaza area up to City Hall. You see there's plantings flanking the staircases, goes up, and then there's planting along the foundation of the building. We'd have I think we're showing 6 new trees here, which is the Catalina ironwood. It's a native tree. It's a wonderful tree. It'd be a great asset to the building. The height's a nice height, which is a drop down from the palm trees to the height of that tree, and then down to the landscaping. So it kind of is a step up. And then on the bottom, it's a view from kind of behind the fountain, also towards the towards the Spring Street, showing the turf back, but then also planting areas at the corner of the plazas, and then along the back wall. Next. And here's another shot kind of from behind the fountain area towards the slope that's along Main Street, and the planting areas that could be had along there. This bottom rendering would be looking from the main the main access walkway and looking along Spring Street through a new planting of predominantly, if not entirely, native plantings along Spring Street, which would run up towards the Spring Street steps, and then the back wall planted with toyon, and also a native plant. And here's a view from the Spring Street area. The new would be a new planting area across a great lawn area for gathering towards the Spring Street steps with the trees and the shrubbery and the flowers along the foundation of the building. And then last, just a shot of the Fireman's Memorial, which would show the DG Granite pathway coming in off of Spring Street, and then native plantings or Mediterranean plantings mixed together to form an entry corner landscape, which would help to celebrate City Hall. That's it. Mike?
Yeah, and somebody, just very quickly, a couple items: funding, implementation, and schedule. So if we were to go with what we're calling the preferred option of $390,000, we've looked at a variety of ways of trying to get funding for this, and we've had a lot of help from many of the council offices, including yours and Council District 9 and the Mayor's office. We're looking at a rebate, possible rebate from the Department of Water and Power under their turf reduction program of approximately $50,000. The Los Angeles Conservation Corps is the partner who we're using on the North Lawn area. They're bringing $100,000 in grant money that they've received. The Metropolitan Water District has committed $10,000, and then as of yesterday, we received we began discussions with Scott's company, the Miracle Grow type company, that they are willing to donate seed, soil amendments, topsoil, and possibly even plants. So we've made substantial strides towards chipping that down with little to no impact on the city. We've also put up on the LA Parks Foundation, www.laparksfoundation.org. There's a place there for anybody to go and donate towards this project. We do that on a variety of projects. We added City Hall to that. And then Rec and Parks is looking at how we're going to continue to look at how we fund the balance. But it's important that we note that there's a lot of different people stepping up that we think we're optimistic that we can get there without very little impact to the city's budget. Implementation, as I stated, the Los Angeles Conservation Corps would be the contractor doing the North Lawn. Rec and Parks Resources, utilizing our youth risk training programs, would do the majority of the South Lawn. And I mentioned the youth training programs. We've been working for a number of years in training youth in smart irrigation technology, green technology. We bring on youth for approximately 6 months, and then we've set them up with job training skills to actually go out and get permanent jobs, and we've had some success in placing them in permanent jobs with some of the larger landscapers around the city. We intend to establish a couple days working with the council and the mayor on a couple volunteer days that we think that we could get good support for people to come in and help do the planting. So we think that might be a positive thing to do.
And for the sake of the record on that, there were a number of statements made quite publicly by representatives of the Occupy movement while they were encamped that they would be happy to help with the restoration, and I think now is the time for them to step up and do exactly that. And I hope that we can, both get volunteer help from those who were here, as well as get contributions to the Parks Foundation website to help pay for some of this cost as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly anybody wishing to donate their time can email us on our website that we've set up. So that's the best way to let us know what their information is and how we might be able to get a hold of them. We're also working with the rebate program from the Department of Water and Power. They have a contractor that they use in a lot of the rebate programs. So we believe that we'd like to basically sign over the rebate to that contractor. And the thing that we really liked about the contract, we had a chance to see some of the work that they've done, as well as they use, most of their workforce is made up of veterans. So he has a job training program with veterans, and it was a good program, and we'd like to partner with them. So we're probably going to be signing over the rebate directly to them. and it actually cuts through a lot of the red tape with the transfer of funds and all that stuff. So, so there will be some private contractors as well. The graffiti removal from the Flint Fountain and memorial benches, as I stated earlier, the cost of that's actually going to be covered via an insurance policy, believe it or not, with the city's fine arts program that the Cultural Affairs Department runs. So
Who knew?
Yeah, who knew? So their Cultural Affairs is actually in the process of using some of that insurance policy to cover the cost of that. So
Very good.
that was good news. So the schedule, this leaves me with the schedule. Our plan is, if, obviously we have a preferred option if we kind of get that through with relative, hopefully with as much consensus as we can, it would be our goal to reopen the lawn areas by the end of May. There's a substantial amount of work that needs to be done to achieve that, but we do want to push as much as we can in the envelope to get that back to normal. The North Lawn, I would say that although we're pushing for the end of May, I'm actually meeting with the Los Angeles Conservation Corps on Friday to begin discussions with them on their schedule, because they have not received all of their money yet, so that might play into how aggressive they can be on their schedule. So even though I'm pushing for the end of May, the North Lawn might have a variation in that schedule as a result of when their funding comes into place. I don't think it'll change a lot, but nonetheless, I need to meet with them to figure that out. And then just to date, what have we done? We've, Rec and Parks has completed trimming all the trees in and around, removing the limbs that were damaged in and around City Hall, as well as we began this week restoring and repairing some of the irrigation infrastructure. So that concludes our report, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Very good, thank you. I've been throwing my questions out as we've gone. Why don't we turn now to public comment on this issue? And again, if you would like to comment on this item, please fill out one of these cards and bring it forward. And we'll take 2 minutes per speaker. I'd like to first invite up Melissa Stoller of the Mar Vista Community Council Green Committee, who will be followed by Lawrence, Zeiss or Zeiss, I'm not sure. Zeiss, thank you. Ms. Stoller, welcome.
Thank you. You said 10 minutes. I'm going to hopefully keep this very brief. I want to thank Recreation and Parks for all the hard work they've put in, and I was surprised at how quickly they posted the 3 options online after I requested that, and I look forward to seeing this presentation online very soon, plus all of the funding detail and who's going to be volunteering labor. I got a really prompt response from Tom Gibson after I posted my comments on the site, but I still have problems with the current options and the process. Santa Monica planted 2 side-by-side residential gardens, one conventional, one sustainable, to see if sustainable landscaping makes financial sense. The conventional site looks like most LA area gardens, grass with some plants near the house. The sustainable site is eye-catching and engaging. It provides habitat for native birds and insects. Water use for the sustainable landscape is about 1/5 that of the traditional one. Labor is less than 30% of that required for the traditional landscape, and the green waste production is about 60%. The initial investment was higher, although I'm kind of surprised at the numbers I'm hearing here. I'd really like to see some detail on that posted online. But over time, there's going to be savings because of the lower maintenance. I know in my neighborhood, the experience of those with sustainable gardens is they water a few times in the summer, and things don't grow that fast. So yes, there's pruning, but it's manageable. City Hall Park, of course, is not a residential garden, and I do understand that the site's historical status and its use as a public meeting space needs to be considered. But I suggest that we look again to our neighbor to the west. Santa Monica recently started the construction phase of
Go ahead and finish.
re-landscaping in front of its historic 1938 City Hall, and 28% of the site is going to be planted with California native and locally adapted plants. Swales and other design elements address water capture and retention, and there's a large area for public gathering and places to sit, but no place to sleep. Okay. The design is striking. The process is even more striking. They created a wonderful website with detailed design and process information. They held design development workshops, as well as sustainable park landscape education workshops. They encouraged public comment. The first public presentation, so far as I know.
I need to ask you to wrap it up.
Okay, well, the first public presentation was at the DLANC on January 10th. I'm hearing the landscaping's gonna start very soon, and my question is, what's the rush? Why not just do the minimum necessary to make the park accessible, then take the time and make the effort to involve the public and to really use all these environmental organizations that are offering assistance?
Okay. Thank you very much. All right.
Thank
Our next speaker is Lawrence Zeiss, followed by Whitney Blumenfeld of CD11. Mr. Zeiss, welcome.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I took the liberty of typing out a 2-page proposal for everyone to look at so that I don't have to be rushing through my presentation. I have taken a good chance to look at the presentations and the works. They raised some interesting arguments. I like the direction that it's going. Let me explain really quick who I am. I am considered one of the top green landscape designers in Los Angeles. I have a client list pretty long, and I've been willing to put aside some of my free time to work with the city. I also was involved with the Occupy movement. I was there and had started working on a native plant design and was collaborating with people in the Occupy who were interested in doing this. There is still a very large interest in the Occupy to produce fundage as well as help with the overall design and implementation process. I have major connections with people that are still interested in doing and also tapping into some very good resources to provide funding, including the rather large projections that have been laid out by the city. Now, in terms of some of the nuts and bolts, they were talking about that there is no native grass that can be used for traverse. Well, if we were making a soccer field, probably, but this is the City Hall grounds that gets walked over during Ciclavia, during a couple farmers markets. There is a native grass created by John Greenlee, a expert in this category, called Carex ponza. You've probably heard about it mentioned in the LA Times. A lot of the native plants, I've used it in driveways, I use it in walkways, I use it in all different types of avenues. It's tough, it's durable, and it requires 1/5 of the water and 1/5 of the maintenance of the standard grasses that are being used. Some of the other things that we're talking about was a mixture of Mediterranean plants. I think that if you go entirely indigenous, not just native, but indigenous, the coastal sage plants of this area are aromatic and they're gorgeous. Some of the local plants, such as the manzanita and the Carpinteria californica, which I outlined here, will not only provide a beautiful, low-maintenance and completely work-free solution, you can also provide little corridors that will keep certain areas pristine, other areas open for occupation, for people to walk around and move. Sorry, maybe the wrong choice of words there. But what's also really exciting about a lot of these plant choices is that this is become a wildlife corridor. This place was owned and used by the birds and the flowering, loving species that are still here. And if we start doing this right at City Hall, people are going to say, you know, that design at LA City Hall, I want a design like that in my backyard. And the more we do that, the more we're going to provide for beautiful songbirds and butterflies and lots of other wonderful things that we haven't had in a long time. Let this city become a model. Let the City Hall become a model for the city. And we could really take some really vibrant steps to showing the world just what Los Angeles is about and what our future is about. Because this design, the kind that we're doing, what we're pushing for, I'm actually part of a coalition of a lot of different people, a lot of environmental groups, as well as other people I've approached, and we're all behind this. Okay. So,
and you have a copy of that for me?
And what I'm saying here is I'm volunteering my services, so please keep me in touch, and I will definitely have this information. There's 3 copies here for all 3 members to look at.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And folks, I'm usually pretty accommodating on the time, but when we get to the end of our time, let's try to wrap up the comments because there's other people who need to speak, and I want to try to be as fair to everyone as possible. Our next speaker is Whitney Blumenfeld from CD11, followed by Ruth Sarnoff.
Sure. I'm here to represent the council member as his planning deputy. The council member believes in the Mar Vista Neighborhood Council's leadership on this matter. He believes, like they do, that this should be a demonstration garden, that sustainability matters, that it matters what is in the City Hall lawn. He would also just like the opportunity to have a meeting with the Mar Vista Neighborhood Council members and some members from the Department of Rec and Parks, just to go over some more of the details and have a better understanding of what's being proposed and the numbers behind everything. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for banking some time savings there as well. I appreciate that. Our next speaker is Ruth Sarnoff, followed by Christopher McKinnon. Ms. Sarnoff, welcome.
I didn't hear any mention of the issue of the use of pesticides and herbicides and in fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, and I wondered, I think you mentioned earlier a group called Scots. I don't know if that's organic process or if that's all a chemical based, but when we're talking about rain runoff and we're trying to have a pristine environment that's healthy for our children to play on. I remember when big swashes of LA Unified were replaced, and there was a lot of work done because of the effect of chemicals on the kindergarten children and the young children that were playing in the grass. So we have a health issue there that I think we need to look at. I also remember when the Department of Water and Power and LA Unified, there was an option at a time when there was state money to solarize public buildings, including schools and places like public buildings here in Los Angeles, state, county, whatever. And that opportunity was, and for the most part, lost. And there was a dispute at the time over water rates between LA Unified and DWP. It was eventually settled, and actually it lowered the water rates, I believe, for the LA Unified School District, which was good. But what I'm saying is this is an opportunity to either move forward and have a reputation as a world-class city. We have some world-class cities around the United States and also abroad, and it would be nice when the people come in, not only the tourists, but people from other countries that come to visit City Hall, and all our children coming through here could have a little kiosk with information about why this is a sustainable, beautiful park.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christopher McKinnon, and if anybody else would like to speak, as of now, Mr. McKinnon is the last one, surprisingly to me. So if anybody else would like to comment, please fill out one of these.
I'm going to take part of Whitney's time if she approves.
That's fine.
But I am also on the Mar Vista Community Council Green Committee, but I also am their liaison to the Recycled Water Advisory Group, which is a joint venture of LADWP and the Bureau of Sanitation. So we're always talking about water there and recycled water and stormwater. So I'm hoping that Rec and Parks will do some stormwater capture, rain barrels, stormwater diversion, especially because you're at the bottom of this hill in the great park across the street, which I hope somebody's putting in some sustainable works over there as well. So I'm going to jump around a little bit, but I'm here to support option 4, which I think the landscape architect that preceded me was speaking about. And there are turf replacements which are not turf. So I think Scott's is the exact wrong company to involve in this project, especially with their chemical basis for maintenance of green areas. And Bureau of Sanitation has free mulch, and they produce it every week, and they deliver it to, I believe, 7 or 8 places around the city, which is free to the public. So I think Rec and Park should take advantage of that here at the City Hall, and maybe should have mulched the whole area already with some volunteer help. As far as volunteer help, every project that I've done in Mar Vista, it costs you more to use volunteers because of the damage, and they're not trained to maintain gardens. And I've worked at the fire department, fire station, library, post office, etc. So these should be professionals or trainees that are going to take the time to learn exactly how to do this work. So part of the savings of no lawn and California natives is you don't have to use gasoline powered machinery, and that in itself would save money as well. So part of the reason I think Occupy LA stayed here was because of the beautiful lawn, because it was comfortable to sit on. So what happens in the future when it is reoccupied or taken over by events that are here? And I don't see how DG can be more expensive than turf. Appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Yes, of course. Come right on up.
Councilman Kevin Regan, Assistant General Manager with Recreation and Parks. And our General Manager just asked me to come up and make a clarification regarding one of the statements of the last speaker. The mulching program that was referred to as being a Bureau Sanitation program is actually a Recreation and Parks program. That program is in collaboration with Bureau Sanitation and the Bureau of Street Services. The mulching site is in Griffith Park. Recreation and Parks runs all of the grinders. Recreation and Parks produces that mulch, and we do use large quantities of mulch throughout the park system. I know that Mike, as you heard, put a lot of care and thought into this plan, took a lot of community input and a lot of public comment. And while the mulching was not necessarily a part of what Mike had talked about, the mulch will certainly be incorporated into the planting areas and utilized, and it will be the free mulch that the city does produce. It's a city product, and just wanted to let you know Recreation and Parks is a big part of that, as well as the production of decomposed granite. Recreation and Parks screens and produces a lot of the decomposed granite that's used in these pathways and other areas throughout the city, and so we do that without the use of pesticides as well.
It's not exactly on topic for this, but since we're going down this road, how about wood chips? Do you get wood chips from tree trimming or anything like that we do?
Yes, we absolutely do, and we have invested several years ago into a very large tub grinding machine. And years ago, we didn't have these types of grinders, but today we do. And this tub grinder can take huge logs and even stumps with roots on them. And so all of literally 100% of all of the waste that comes from tree trimming operations, or when storms damage trees and they fall down, it's all ground. We have the ability to put different screens into this grinder so we can produce different sizes of chips. We can produce everything from a large, kind of like a chip you might use in landscaping, to a very fine material that you would use for mulching or for composting.
Great. Okay, thank you. If I can just follow up, Mike, with a couple of things. Excuse me. A couple of the speakers spoke about runoff and stormwater recapture. Are those has consideration of those issues been part of this plan?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Mike Scholl, Recreation Parks. The areas at the base of the slopes in the South Lawn areas particularly are looking at putting a gravel trench in underneath the planting areas or the turf areas, whichever it may be, to keep the water from running off into the sidewalk, which would ultimately end up in the storm drain system. The only thing that we have not, although we're planning on doing that, we are planning on also running it through the Department of Public Works, Bureau of Engineering, to ensure that doesn't create any issues with the past renovations of City Hall with water, introducing that water in. Okay, all right. But anyway, yes, we will be looking at that. But as John was wanted me to say, that Recapture Parks globally, throughout the city, has been a huge partner of Proposition O with those sorts of measures. The largest projects going on are in the park system. The vast majority of that program is taking place in and under parks. That at the end of the day, the public won't know, but they might be playing a soccer game or a baseball field over a large retention area that's underground. Yeah. So we've partnered heavily with sanitation and Bureau of Engineering on that.
Okay. One of the speakers reminded us of the value of the educational value of this and the opportunity if we have educational signage and material like that, so that when visitors come from around the world to City Hall, they might actually see our sustainability practices and understand the benefit of it. Has thought been given to that, putting up some kind of educational material as part of this plan?
It absolutely has, and I couldn't agree more that that opportunity is very prevalent in this. So, although we didn't include it we weren't including it as part of the phase one, but one of the ideas that we had is through a lot of those stakeholders that have requested things like that. I was hoping to see if anybody would volunteer to help us put together the language that might go on these signs, that that we could create a program of which in the next phase of that we could actually have the signs made and put up, but it would be done outside of the city was our hope.
Okay, maybe another job for the Parks Foundation.
Parks Foundation, or some of the native plant societies, things like that. I mean, we actually haven't talked in detail about that, although in general, we've said that putting up signage is an important part of this.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for the report. I think that there's certainly always things that we can look at to do something better and more sustainably, and spend more time on it. I think each of those has a cost element that we have to consider and take into account. I'm really encouraged by the fact that you have already identified a number of potential funding sources for this. I think that gives us a much greater flexibility to move forward with a productive plan. I think that, I'm by myself today, so my recommendation would be to approve the motion, move this forward to council. Whether or not a report to council would be needed, I don't think that's even actually called for in the motion. I think the motion was simply to have a report to committee, and they would presumably receive and file in council, and this would be internal to the department, right? I mean, this is a decision that is within your existing budget.
Typically, yes.
It's not something that really requires further direction, I think. Is that right?
We just simply please approve the motion, receive and file the Department of Rec and Parks report.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation as chair. Oh, there's one more card, or is that a public comment card before I close this? General public comment. Okay, so that'll be my recommendation, but I would like to continue to be engaged as you move forward to see if there is additional work that we can do to integrate some of the great minds that we have in this city, some of the great sustainability leaders that we have in the city. I know you've done a great deal of that already, but I see this as kind of a starting point for that process, and I would like to see this as a vehicle to further engage people from the environmental community, people from the who are advocates for native planting and sustainable landscapers, like the gentleman who's here, to try to see if we can make this really a world-class example of sustainability, of our commitment as a city to sustainability, which Recreation and Parks demonstrates all the time. And this is just a you couldn't have a better stage than the
Precisely.
South Lawn of City Hall of the second largest city in America to do exactly that. So I'm encouraged by the direction that you're going in. I would just encourage you to continue to move that forward and to continue to work with my office to do that.
And Councilman, to that degree, I just speaking to one of the comments that was made to our neighbor to the west, their city hall, they're looking at, if they are in fact looking at 28%, we are looking at 50%. So we're almost double.
Turf reduction.
Of turf reduction.
Yeah.
So we're almost double what was referenced.
Very good. Well, that will be my recommendation, and I think that concludes this matter. That brings us to general public comment. We have one card so far. If anybody else would like to provide any comment, please fill out a card and bring it forward. Ms. Sarnoff. And if, as you exit the room, if you could please maintain order in the room as you exit, ladies and gentlemen. We still have public comment, so please keep your voices down as you exit. Thank you.
Yes,
Ms. Sarnoff.
I wanted to raise a process question and perhaps get some feedback. I believe under CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, there is a recommendation that when large numbers of people in a community are interested in something and agencies of a city or a school district or whatever also have an interest, and there's can be an effort at more cross-fertilization if there's some opportunity where people that work for the city and who drew up the original proposals and gave people the original choices meet together with all the other people, individuals, organizations, and cross-fertilize some of this, because if this process moves too quickly through to the city, just for time reasons, I think a lot could be lost. I don't see any reason why it can't move quickly and still give some opportunity. You mentioned a roundtable. I was not even aware of it, and I think probably many others weren't either, so I'm raising this as a...
You're speaking to the agenda item that we already spoke to.
Well,
this is a time for general public comment.
Part, and I think the wind-up of the meeting here just it leaves me with the impression it's going to move very quickly for a recommendation and a council passage of this in a very quick time rate. If we're talking about having grass growing and plants in by May.
Okay.
This is already the end of January. So I'm looking at trying to see, and nothing was said at the end of the meeting about what the process how we might proceed from here from the chair. So I'm just raising that as a process issue.
All right.
Thank
you very much. All right. If there's no further public comment, that brings us to the close of this meeting. We're adjourned. Thank you.